I'm really looking forward to grabbing dinner with Susan at the pub. It's been a while. However, after getting settled in and enjoying ourselves for a bit, I hear a familiar voice from a nearby table. Listening closely, I realize it's Thomas, who should be at home, chatting with another woman. Is he cheating? Worried, I quickly activate a recording app on my phone and start capturing their conversation. Little did I know this would lead to a situation that would require calling the police. My name is Mary. I'm a 28-year-old office worker without any remarkable accomplishments. I got married last year to Thomas, and although we're living modestly, we've been enjoying our married life. Currently, we've both been working in the city after moving from a suburban area. Adjusting to city life hasn't been easy for me, as I lived with my parents until recently. The reason we moved here is primarily to accommodate Thomas's work. At first, everything was exciting and fun, quite different from my hometown in Philadelphia. But the excitement wore off quickly. Life in the city is expensive, and people seem a bit colder than I'm used to. So I suggested to Thomas that we spend the winter visiting my parents. Surprisingly, he was enthusiastic. We quickly prepared and headed to my family home. What I hadn't told Thomas was that my parents own an old warehouse. The stuff inside is covered in dust and in a terrible state. However, Thomas's eyes lit up when he saw it. He loves those TV shows where they unearth hidden treasures from old buildings and safes. "There's got to be incredible treasures in this warehouse," Thomas exclaimed. "The TV shows say warehouses like this often contain valuable antiques. We should clean it up right away and have it appraised." Excited like a kid on a treasure hunt, Thomas starts exploring the warehouse. And given that it's winter, the temperature inside the unheated warehouse is in the single digits. Sure, I got concerned. Maybe we should call it a day? Just because there's stuff in the storage unit doesn't mean it's valuable. Plus, it's freezing. We could get sick working out here. Let's come back when it's warmer, maybe around springtime. When I suggest this, Thomas looked a bit reluctant, but said, "All right." After that, we headed inside the house and had a warm reunion with my parents. A few days into our stay, Susan reached out. "Long time no see. Heard you're back in town. Want to catch up like old times? How about meeting at a local pub? Let me know." Apparently, Mom had told the neighbors I was back. My heart leapt at the message, and I quickly replied, "Definitely, let's chat like we used to. Can't wait." We touched base a few more times to finalize the details. Thomas had work to do at home, so I went out on my own. I was a bit nervous meeting Susan after so long, but arrived at the designated spot. Turns out Susan was already there. "Long time, huh? Fill me in on your city life." We headed into the restaurant we had reserved and took our seats, reminiscing about the good old days. We ordered beers and appetizers and kicked back. We were having such a good time that we got a bit rowdy. About 30 minutes in, we finally settled down. Just then, with a cheerful greeting from a waiter, new customers were seated nearby. At first, I paid no mind, but then I thought, huh? When I heard one of them speak, it sounded like Thomas. Thomas had said he was working from home. Curious, but also thinking, maybe he needed a break from being alone at my parents' house. I got up to approach him. That's when I heard another voice. A woman's voice. Was he out meeting a woman behind my back? But their conversation didn't sound flirty. I was about to speak when Thomas said something shocking. "Look, Karen, I'm glad we went through with today's plan. That storage unit was filled with what looked like valuable antiques. They were dusty and not in the best condition, but they're worth a lot nonetheless." I almost blurted out in shock. The Karen that Thomas was talking to was actually an old friend of mine. We used to hang out a lot before I married Thomas and moved to the city. I thought the name sounded familiar, but never imagined it would be her. More than that, I wanted to confront them. When did they meet? What was their plan? But I held back and continued eavesdropping. Then Karen spoke up. "Right, Mary's family has always been careless with that warehouse. They don't trust that there are valuable things in there. It's a waste, really. We just need to take it and sell it, maybe buy a car with the money. But what about you? If you get caught robbing your wife's place, you're done for. My mind went blank. I almost forgot Susan was with me. But Susan, having heard everything, whispered,
"This doesn't sound like a joke. Let's record this. If we go to the police, it's better to have the conversation as evidence."
I reached for my phone, my hands trembling. I steadied my shaking hand with the other and started the recording. Throughout, they continued to demean me. Then another bombshell dropped.
"Lisa will be at the warehouse soon, right? Tell her not to mess this up,"
Thomas said to Karen. Lisa was also one of my new friends, smart and knowledgeable, helping me often with schoolwork. Lisa was in on this too? I couldn't believe it. Why? What did I do to deserve this? Susan comforted me, and I managed to compose myself. Susan continued the recording, while I rushed to the restroom and called the police. The officer seemed skeptical, but said,
"We'll increase patrols."
Not entirely trusting the police, I alerted my neighbors to be vigilant and lock their doors. I then called my parents and emailed all the neighbors I could reach. Though they seemed skeptical, they promised to be cautious. Relieved, I returned to where Susan was sitting. Just then, Thomas's phone rang. Judging by his reaction, Lisa had failed to rob the warehouse. Thomas began to complain about the current situation. From the conversation, it seemed they were meeting here to create an alibi for Lisa. If anything went wrong, they planned to say that Lisa was dining with Karen. Why would they choose this pub as their alibi location on the day I decided to go out for drinks? Inside, I felt a sense of relief mixed with a serves-you-right kind of satisfaction. From that point on, I quietly began preparations for a divorce to free myself from Thomas. First up was getting ready to move out. I tried my best to act normal so I wouldn't arouse suspicion. Turns out preparing to move was more challenging than I thought. Moreover, keeping it from Thomas added an extra layer of stress. But I didn't do this all alone. Susan, who had recorded the conversation for me, lent a helping hand with various tasks. I was so grateful for her support. Thanks to her help, I was able to complete the preparations much faster than I had anticipated. I then immediately filed for divorce from Thomas. When I explained the reasons, he brushed it off.
"You can't divorce me over some made-up story. Stop joking and let's prepare dinner."
But the moment he heard the recorded conversation, his face turned ashen.
"What is this?"
he said in a low voice. I laid it all out for Thomas. How he and Karen were scheming at the pub, how Susan and I were sitting nearby, and how we prevented them from stealing antiques from my family's warehouse. Upon hearing this, Thomas finally admitted his guilt. However, he had no intention of going through with the divorce. That's understandable. After all, his parents had passed away, leaving him with no home to return to, but I flatly rejected his plea. He begged repeatedly, but eventually accepted the inevitable when I hinted at legal action. Finally, a massive weight lifted off my shoulders. I headed straight to the courthouse and finalized the divorce. As for Thomas, he seemed lost, unsure of what to do next. 2 days later, I got a call from Nancy. Apparently, Thomas, Karen, and Lisa were all blaming each other for their shared debacle. In fact, Lisa had planned to have a male friend help her move items from the warehouse. But Nancy had called the police when she saw this unfamiliar man after my tip about suspicious activity. The police patrols increased, and Lisa couldn't even get close to my house. She had no choice but to flee. The trio was busy pointing fingers at each other.
"You should have been more careful, Lisa. I can't believe you brought some guy without telling us,"
said one.
"Well, you two should have been the cautious ones. How did you not notice Mary was nearby? Why was Mary at the pub in the first place?"
Excuse me? The only confusing thing here is your logic. I just listened to Thomas's plan and had a drink. I didn't do anything. So it's the two of you who are at fault. I'm not involved," said Karen.
"What are you talking about? I had no intention of doing anything like this. You're the ones who took my stupid idea and acted on it. I'm not the one to blame,"
Thomas retorted. Nancy told me, "You should sue them," but I just wasn't feeling it. Honestly, the effort to sue and actually win seemed too much. I could probably win, but I didn't want to waste any more time or money on these jerks. After that, Thomas kept begging to get back together.
It was just a joke back then. They took it too far. I didn't do anything, I promise. I won't do something stupid like that again,
he said, but I didn't trust him. Eventually, Thomas just disappeared. All three were busy convincing their friends that they weren't in the wrong, and eventually those friends drifted away. Word got around the neighborhood about what they'd done, and it seems like Thomas couldn't take the heat and vanished. Karen and Lisa were still bad-mouthing each other, but they also couldn't handle the cold stares and disappeared. Rumors circulated. Some say they became recluses. Others say they fled far away. Suing them now would be a hassle, so I discussed things with my parents and decided to put this chapter behind me. The mess all started with the warehouse cleaning. It took some time, but we tidied up all the antiques in the warehouse and sold whatever we could. Turns out there were some valuable pieces in there, and we made quite a sum. In hindsight, Thomas did have a good eye for antiques, but with the money, we decided to take our first trip overseas. Up until now, we've been too busy and not financially ready for international travel. I quickly invited my parents. They were totally up for it, saying opportunities like this are rare. After we get back, we're planning to take a domestic trip with Susan, the real MVP of this whole saga.
Have you decided where you're going?
I'm still torn. Dad wants to go to Australia and Mom's rooting for Europe.
What a happy dilemma.
Thank you. Let's go together when we're back. Susan grinned and said,
I'm looking forward to it.
As I'm getting excited about my first international trip, I'm also wondering what souvenir to get for Susan.
Seriously, you're such a fool. How can anyone be as inept as you? Fool, inept. How many times had such cruel words been hurled at me? I had vowed my eternal love to him, truly believing that we could find happiness together. That was the idea, at least, when we got married. But when I came to my senses, the so-called love had vanished somewhere. My husband's domineering attitude escalated day by day, to the point where even the care of my mother-in-law was forced upon me. Physically and emotionally, I was on the brink. If things kept going this way, I would lose my sanity. However, God did not abandon me. The person who reached out to me, teetering on the edge of despair, was none other than my mother-in-law, whom I was taking care of. My name is Mary Wagner, 30 years old. After graduating from university, I worked in a publishing company. I quit my job at the time of marriage, and now I'm a full-time housewife. My friends say they envy me. How lucky you are to be a housewife. Your husband must be earning well, they say. But my married life isn't all that happy. In fact, it might be closer to hell. The cause of this was my husband, Jack. We met through work and got married after 2 years of dating. Jack, 3 years older than me, had a slightly cool side to him, and we weren't exactly the lovey-dovey couple. Still, I loved him for his solid self-identity and mature composure. I thought we could live a peaceful, happy life together. That was my expectation. But the moment we became a married couple, his attitude completely changed. Jack, to put it plainly, was a patriarch. I realized this a few days after our marriage. I, who had listened to his desire for me to become a full-time housewife, began to devote myself to household chores from the day after our marriage. That day, too, I had made dinner in time for Jack's return and was waiting for him. Jack comes home a little past 7 p.m. He then, looking at the dinner on the table, suddenly raised his voice. "Hey, what's this meal?" "Huh? It's a gratin and salad, plus a pottage soup." "Don't mess with me. If you're going to prepare a meal for your tired husband, it should be a full-course meal." I'm sorry. The last time you said it was delicious, so...
That's not an excuse. Why can't you even do such simple things? You're really over as a woman. You're just too incompetent.
You don't have to say it like that, I mutter with a bit of a troubled expression, and Jack glares at me. Then suddenly he threw the salad-filled dish onto the floor. At this unexpected act, a scream-like voice slipped out. "What are you doing?"
Huh? It's because you, as a wife, can't even do the bare minimum, right? That's why I made it clear to you.
You don't have to disrespect the food like that.
Shut up. If you have time to make excuses, use your deficient brain to think more about how to become suitable as my wife. You fool.
Fool? I'd been called that for the first time in my life. Sure, I've been scolded by my parents, and I've argued with my brother and friends, but I've never been subjected to such cruel words. More so, being told such things by the husband I love. It was only a few days since our marriage. I never imagined that he would throw the food on the floor just because he didn't like the dinner menu. That being said, I'm a housewife, and I'll continue to be dependent on him for our livelihood. I can't go against my husband. As a newlywed, the last thing I wanted to do was upset my husband. Since that day, I've been treading on eggshells around him. I'm extremely cautious not to step on his landmines. Every piece of laundry must be ironed meticulously. The loaded potato soup should be simple, and the seasoning of the side dishes should be well seasoned. Cleaning, even a single strand of hair on the floor, is not allowed. Living under such pressure, my nerves gradually wore thin. But without regard to me, his patriarchal dominance continued to escalate.
Hey, this shirt has a crease left in the sleeve. Don't you have eyes?
I'm sorry. I'll iron it right away.
I'm leaving for work now, you know. You're always so slow.
I'll do it right away.
You won't have time for that. Damn, you're so annoying first thing in the morning. How much more do you need to upset me to be satisfied, you incompetent woman?
I'm sorry. Really, really sorry. Whenever I made a mistake, I immediately bowed my head in apology. This was also something ordered by my husband. Depending on the severity of the mistake, the level of my apology changes. This time, I was forgiven just by bowing. But when it's really bad, I have to kneel down in apology. When my mistakes continue, he sometimes even pointedly presents me with a filled-out divorce document. It's scary how you get used to things, and if you keep living like this for a year, you start to feel like you're absolutely worthless. But I can't divorce him, not in my current jobless state. I can't tell my parents, who were so happy for our marriage, that I got divorced, especially not in such a short time span. The thought of continuing to be scolded by my husband forever filled me with despair for my future. As always, I was preparing dinner this day and waiting for him to come home. My daily routine is to finish cooking before 7 p.m. and have everything ready for him to eat at any time. As soon as the front door opens, I start laying out the food. If I don't finish by the time he sits down, I'll be forced to apologize again. My husband usually takes his seat in silence, but for some reason, this day was different. As he loosened his tie, he started a conversation with me.
Mary, we're moving to my parents' house this weekend.
Huh? Your parents' house? You mean your mom's place?
Yeah, that's right. Have all our stuff packed by then.
Why all of a sudden? Jack, you've always said that you didn't want to go back to your parents' house. In response to my probing question, his cold gaze pierced me. I instinctively shut my mouth, and after a pause, he opened his.
My mother fell, and it's hard for her to live on her own now.
What? Then we should go there right away.
She's been hospitalized for a week. We're moving when she gets discharged this weekend.
And I see that's what happened. But why all of a sudden? You were so against going back to your parents' house.
You can guess why, can't you? Because I can inherit wealth.
Wealth? As if he was delighted by his mother's situation, he continued the conversation.
Listen, my father was just an ordinary guy, but my mother's family is rich, so she has a decent amount of money.
What does that have to do with what happened this time?
If I act dedicated during this time, I might be able to get a hefty inheritance, right? If we, as a couple, rush over, I'm sure she'll give us the whole inheritance.
For such a reason? Isn't that a bit disrespectful?
Shut up. You're being supported by me, so just listen quietly.
I'm sorry. Being yelled at loudly, I instinctively apologized as usual. In front of my downcast self, he proclaimed with a triumphant look.
Listen, you're the one who's going to take care of my mom. From now on, you're going to work as my maid at my parents' house for the rest of your life.
Maid? You mean like that?
Don't talk back. Who do you think is providing for your current lifestyle?
It's thanks to Jack.
Right? Depending on how seriously you take care of my mother, the amount of inheritance we can get will change. So don't slack off in the care, understand?
Urged to reply by him, I responded softly, yes. Seeing my obedience, he showed a satisfied smile before starting his dinner. Forcing me to care for his mother just for her inheritance? He doesn't think of me as his wife at all. To him, I'm just a housemaid. Although I knew this, being told so directly was quite a shock to me. Even so, I didn't have the courage to talk back. I was, in a sense, brainwashed, having erased my own possibilities. The next day, as per my husband's command, I began packing our belongings. We moved to my mother-in-law's place a week later to coincide with her discharge from the hospital. On the day of her discharge, Jack didn't come to the hospital, using work as an excuse. So I was the one accompanying my mother-in-law. On the way back from the hospital, my mother-in-law opened her mouth in apology.
Mary, I'm really sorry. Because of me, you're going through all this.
No, don't worry about it. I'm a housewife, and if I can support you while staying at home, then there's nothing better than that.
Thank you, but aren't you bothered by how sudden this was?
Well, packing was a bit rushed, I guess.
I bet it was. Even I was surprised. Jack moving in with us? I wonder why he decided to do this all of a sudden. Mary, did you hear anything?
No, I didn't. It's understandable that my mother-in-law would find it strange. Jack has always disliked her, often saying things like,
"She's a pain," and "I don't want to see her."
Despite this, he moved in with her as soon as she was hospitalized, aiming for her inheritance. To be honest, I was taken aback by Jack's transformation. However, I couldn't tell my mother-in-law the truth. Trying not to give anything away, I pretended to be calm. From this day on, my life as a caregiver began. Adapting to the unfamiliar role of a caregiver, along with the housework in the large single-family home. Even returning to his parents' home didn't change Jack's domineering nature, and I was verbally abused almost daily when my mother-in-law wasn't around. I wasn't allowed to skimp on housework or caregiving, and my days were filled with constant activity from morning till night. This went on for about a month, until one day, as I was wiping my mother-in-law's body, she voiced her concern. "Mary, have you lost weight again?" No, don't worry about it, Mother." "Are you sure? I thought the same when you moved in. You looked a lot more worn out than when you first got married." She was right. Over the past 1.5 years of married life, I've lost 15 pounds. It's not that I've been skipping meals, but my appetite has certainly decreased. More than that, I don't have time to eat leisurely. My mother-in-law noticed the changes in me that even Jack hadn't. Just that fact alone made me feel a little less lonely. Not wanting to worry my mother-in-law, I forced a smile. "Don't worry about me, Mother. Just being able to have these nice chats with you every day makes me happy." "Mary, let's stop this gloomy talk. Should I wipe your other hand, Mother?" Yes, please." Then my phone suddenly rang. "Oh, it looks like it's Jack." At my mother-in-law's words, my body tensed. Jack had ordered me to answer his calls immediately. However, as I was holding a wet towel, I couldn't answer right away. But I knew if I didn't respond promptly, Jack would be furious again. Using my elbow, I managed to hit the answer button and switch the call to speaker. "Hello?" I replied. The moment I answered, a loud, angry voice came from the other end of the line. "Hey, don't mess around!" it shouted. "Why didn't you answer immediately?" I'm sorry, I was a bit occupied." "What? A maid should answer at the first ring." "But I was in the middle of something and couldn't." "Didn't I always tell you not to talk back? You're so annoying. Why are you so incompetent?" I'm sorry." "You're taking proper care of the old lady, right? The amount of inheritance depends on how well you do your job. Do you get that?" Being berated in front of my mother-in-law brought a rush of shame. He repeatedly insulted me, calling me incompetent and annoying, and then abruptly hung up the phone. After Jack's call ended, a heavy silence filled the room. It was broken by none other than my mother-in-law. "Mary, that was Jack, right? Does he always talk to you like that?" Yes, but it's my fault. I am incompetent." "What are you saying? You're such a kind and good girl." "Mom." "I can't overlook this, Mary. It's time to get back at him." "Huh?" My mother-in-law then suggested a plan. Following her instructions, I threw all of Jack's belongings into the yard and locked the front door. Together we waited for Jack to come home. A few hours later, we could hear rattling noises from the entrance. It must have been Jack, but of course the locked door wouldn't open. Despite the intercom ringing, I ignored it just as my mother-in-law had instructed. Finally, my phone started ringing. It was Jack. I switched the call to speaker and answered. "Hello?" He started off shouting immediately. "Hey, don't mess around! Open the front door right now!" "I can't do that." "What? What are you saying?" "This is at the order of your mother." "What?" Unable to comprehend, he repeatedly shouted, "Don't mess around!" and "Open it now!" To him, my mother-in-law let out a cold voice. "The one messing around is you, you fool." Mom? I always knew you were cold, but I never thought you'd treat your wife like this. "No, that's not." "I knew something was off when you suddenly moved in. To use your wife and rely on inheritance. How can you live such a shameful life?" "No, that's not true." "What's not true?" "I have no intention of leaving you any inheritance.
If you understand, get lost. This is my house. You will never be allowed back in."
Flustered by my mother-in-law's words, Jack began pounding on the door.
Through the phone, I could hear him begging, "Please, do something."
I have an ally, my mother-in-law. I won't be brainwashed any longer. With resolution, I said firmly to Jack on the phone, "I want a divorce. I can't go on with you anymore."
"What? What are you saying?"
"Shut up. I'm done being married to a man like you. I don't waste my life anymore. I won't give up on my own life. I've decided to carve out my own happiness."
Don't joke around. You can't live without me."
"There's nothing I can't do. No matter how tough it gets, it's better than being with you. I will overcome anything. I will no longer need you in my life. I refuse to have a trash like you." I abruptly hung up the phone and blocked his contact. His yelling could be heard from outside, but it eventually changed to cries of despair. My mother-in-law reported this to the police. For his nuisance behavior, he was taken away by officers. I used the divorce papers he had given me before to formally divorce him. On top of that, I sued him for compensation through a lawyer for mental and physical distress. With the witness of my mother-in-law, the proceedings went smoothly. After paying the lump sum compensation to me, Jack's savings were exhausted. In addition, he lost his position at his company after they found out about his police records, and he was reduced to an ordinary employee. Naturally, my mother-in-law refused to pass down her inheritance to Jack. After a discussion with the lawyer, in accordance with my mother-in-law's wish to leave everything to me, it was decided that she would transfer me about $1 million per year. I continue to care for my mother-in-law at her house. It's about the only thing I can do for her now.
"Mary, I'm so sorry for always troubling you. Even after divorcing Jack, you're still taking care of me."
"Why are you saying that, Mom? I should be the one thanking you."
"Really, I'm so fortunate to have a daughter like you."
"Same here. Let's keep supporting each other, okay? My life with my mother-in-law is filled with more smiles than I could have imagined. I'll do my best to do what I can for her until the end of her life."
My name is Rosalind. I'm a housewife. I'm currently living with my husband Kevin's family. My father-in-law has passed away, so it's me, my mother-in-law Emily, Kevin, and our 6-month-old daughter sharing the house. But let me tell you, Emily is someone I can't let my guard down around. She's super protective of Kevin, even checking to see if his shoelaces are tied. She hasn't cut the apron strings yet. That would be fine, except she calls me the thief who stole Kevin. I'm at my wit's end. I've tried just to ignore her and not to get too involved in her life. But there's a limit to that too. Whenever I'm doing housework, she has something to complain about. "If you wash dishes like that, they won't get clean. Do it right." Or, "Your cleaning is too shallow. Spend more time and vacuum every corner." I thought I was doing everything properly, but she always starts with criticism. I didn't know what to do. Worse still, Kevin doesn't do anything to stop her. "All moms are like that. Just get along," is all he'd say. I'm not looking for advice on how to get along. I want him to stop her. But even if I say that, he only responds with, "Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict is your issue, not mine." So I couldn't count on Kevin, and Emily made life unbearable every single day. My only solace was raising our newborn daughter. I can honestly say my daughter keeps me sane. But recently, Emily came up with a new way to harass me. "You're cheating on Kevin, aren't you?" "What?" I couldn't help but raise my voice. I had no idea why she would think that. When I asked her why, she said, "Kevin's coworker has been mentioning your name a lot lately. Why would his coworker know about you?" I had no clue. Maybe Kevin told his coworker about me, but Emily wouldn't even consider that. She kept calling me an adulteress and even started saying that our daughter was the product of an affair. This kid is genuinely mine and Kevin's, I swear. I'd even be okay with a DNA test. But whenever I suggest that, Emily just dismisses it, saying, "Science isn't trustworthy." If you can't trust science, then what can you trust in this world? But that's just how Emily is. She never stopped accusing me of cheating and kept harassing me. At times, she'd splash water on me or intentionally startle our daughter, who I was carrying on my back, making her cry. Having to soothe my crying daughter each time was mentally draining. My daughter was undoubtedly stressed too. Through all this, Kevin didn't lift a finger to help. What does he think of our daughter and me? Days passed in this toxic environment of Emily's harassment and Kevin's indifference. Then Kevin decided to invite a colleague over for dinner. Turns out, it was the same colleague who had ignited the cheating rumors in the first place. Thinking this could clear the air, I agreed to join the dinner party. On the day of the dinner party, I was eager to clear up the misunderstanding, but as soon as it started, Kevin and Emily chugged their beers. Meanwhile, I was stuck making appetizers. No chance to clear the air at all. I really want to resolve this misunderstanding, but finding the right moment to talk with my colleagues has been impossible. While I was wondering what to do, Emily and Kevin got completely drunk. There's no way I can clear things up now. Then Emily starts to make a scene. Worried that she'd break stuff, I tried to stop her. Big mistake. Emily grabbed me and yelled, "You cheater! Don't slack off!" and poured beer all over me. I was okay, but the beer splashed on our 6-month-old daughter as well. She ingested some of it. Neither showed any concern that our daughter had consumed alcohol. Thankfully, the sober colleague realized the gravity of the situation and called an ambulance. Kevin and Emily were angry, saying, "You ruined our good time." But they were far from rational. Who gives a baby beer? Yet they're not worried at all, which is just unbelievable. My daughter and I had to rush to the hospital in an ambulance, and she had to be admitted immediately. The coworker has come along looking incredibly apologetic. It's not the coworker's fault, but still. The next day, thankfully, my daughter was out of danger, but they decided to run some tests and keep her in the hospital for another day. When I returned home, both Kevin and Emily were glaring at me. "See, I told you, this woman can't be trusted," Emily said to Kevin. Emily was giving Kevin an earful. She said that me going to the hospital last night with my colleague was proof of an affair. I was baffled, truly. My daughter could have lost her life, and her real father wasn't even there for her. I think that's a lot more serious, don't you? Emily came up to me and said, "You cheating witch! You went to a hotel, not a hospital, didn't you?" I couldn't take it anymore. I raised my hand to slap her. Then Emily shrieked, "Oh my God, she's hitting me! I knew she was a devil!" Kevin took Emily's side, making me out to be the villain. "What a terrible wife you are! You do want to be with that other guy," Emily added. My head began to ache. Why is their thinking so twisted? I couldn't take it anymore. My daughter was in the hospital, and I didn't want to stay in that house a second longer. I found myself running aimlessly, and before I knew it, I was at a nearby park. I sat down on a swing and started to ponder what lay ahead. What if the test results show that my daughter has severe long-term health issues? What if, in the worst-case scenario, the test revealed life-threatening complications? As these thoughts swirled in my head, tears started to flow uncontrollably. but I knew that sharing these worries with Kevin and Emily would be pointless. They'd never understand. They'd probably say, "If you're so worried, she must be the child of your affair." How could they be so callous toward their own daughter and granddaughter? Lost in thought, my colleague appeared at the park. My coworker listened to my worries and concerns, occasionally nodding along. Getting it all out felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I was embarrassed to cry in front of my coworker, though. Once I had cleared my mind, I decided to ask my coworker something that had been bothering me. "Why did you tell Kevin my name?" Kevin's colleague had something surprising to say. It was a golden opportunity to get back at Kevin and Emily for all the awful things they had done. With my colleague's help, I planned my perfect revenge. "The moment you walk in, look who's with her," Emily spouted as I returned home. Kevin glared at me with contempt.
I can't believe it. I thought you were a good colleague.
I let out some harsh words toward my coworker. It seemed like they didn't want to admit that they might be wrong. My coworker looked upset and started to say something, but I interrupted. "Kevin, you're getting fired." Kevin looked confused and said, "What?" Clearly, he didn't understand what was going on. Well, it's understandable. This is pretty out of the blue. I decided to explain things step by step. "My uncle is the CEO of the company where you and your coworker work."
"What? Your relative?"
Kevin's astonished. Can't blame him. Even I didn't know this at first. I've been friendly with my uncle since I was a child. He always treated me well. This New Year's, he was even moved to tears seeing my newborn daughter. He had always said I could turn to him if I ever needed anything, but I never thought he'd be Kevin's boss. The reason our coworker knew so much about me is because my uncle showed off pictures of me and my daughter at a party. It's clear he truly cares about me.
"So why am I getting fired?"
Kevin interrupted my explanation. I thought it would be obvious why he's getting fired, but Kevin seemed slow to catch on. My daughter was urgently hospitalized. My uncle naturally was furious. My coworker had reported the incident to my uncle, and as a result, Kevin, the mastermind, was going to be fired. Kevin still wasn't convinced.
"This is ridiculous. You can't fire me over something like this."
I wanted to say the same thing about his ridiculous claim. Sure, Emily was technically the one who spilled the beer, but Kevin didn't stop her. "Kevin, why didn't you stop her?" When I asked Kevin, Kevin said,
"I thought that baby was a result of an affair between the coworker and you."
How long will he keep saying such stupid things? I was too stunned to respond. Then Emily chimed in. "Exactly. It's your fault for having an affair in the first place." Emily seemed very angry, but her claim had no basis. My coworker and I never had an affair, and we've clarified this to my uncle. No matter how much Emily shouts about an affair, her claim won't hold water. Just being fired wouldn't be enough for me. I had prepared something for this moment. Sign this. What I presented to Kevin was a divorce petition. He was shocked yet again. Perhaps he never imagined things would go this far after all the terrible things he'd done. If you think I'm just here for your convenience, you're sorely mistaken.
"Are you kidding me? There's no way I'm agreeing to a divorce."
Kevin brushed off the divorce papers I had presented. "Even if you refuse the divorce, we'll just end up in mediation. I have detailed notes on every wrong you've committed against me, complete with dates. With ample evidence documented, mediation would likely swing in my favor. So even if Kevin refuses to divorce, it would only waste time and money if we went to mediation. I'm asking you to stop this pointless resistance." When I told Kevin this, he burst into tears, saying, "Please don't divorce me. I don't want to lose my job either." Well, he should have thought of that before allowing Emily to harass me. Now it's too convenient for him to ask for forgiveness. Throughout this conversation, Emily looked on blankly, as if this had nothing to do with her. As if she wasn't the root cause of all this trouble. That's not happening. I had also prepared a strategy to make Emily pay for her actions. Emily, you'll need to compensate for all the wrongs you've done. When I said that, Emily started to panic. Why me? We were talking about Kevin. While Kevin is guilty, the direct harassment came from you, Emily. It would be strange if you weren't punished. Both Kevin and Emily refused to accept it and began making excuses. Like mother, like son, I thought. Emily starts shifting the blame onto me. If our reasoning is correct, then it's not our fault. You're the one who's making us uncomfortable. So it's your fault. She insists. If we let this kind of logic slide, it spells the end for any kind of reasonable society. That kind of behavior is absolutely not allowed. Please grow up and take responsibility for your actions, I said calmly. Both clung to me. Stop this. All this started because of the affair, right? Let's just forgive each other and move on. Forgive each other? For the last time, I never cheated. Emily made it up in her head. Her grip on reality was slipping. This must be a dream. There's no way something like this could happen to me. Kevin, you must be dreaming too. She seemed desperate to escape reality. Kevin was overwhelmed, worried about losing his job and the potential alimony. What am I going to do now? How will I live? My life is over. He seemed anxious about his future. Well, he brought this on himself. I hope he learns from this. Look, I'll be consulting a lawyer for the next steps. From now on, let's communicate through my attorney. Goodbye. With that, I left the house. I could hear Kevin and Emily shouting something, but no matter how loud they were, I didn't turn back. Afterwards, I consulted a lawyer, divorced Kevin, and received a significant amount of alimony. Thanks to my coworker, Kevin lost his job. He tried to find a new one, but was unsuccessful, and now he's scraping by, with day labor wearing himself out. Emily, because of her betrayal, ended up paying me a hefty sum, draining her retirement funds. She couldn't get by on her pension alone, so she started part-time work at a supermarket, but she hurt her back lifting heavy things and ended up bedridden. Kevin had to step up and take care of Emily. Despite having no prior caregiving experience, the burden became so overwhelming to him that he had to quit his day job. Emily, who never really cut the apron strings, and Kevin, who had accepted this dynamic. I used to think their unique relationship would last a lifetime. However, the moment Emily needed care, I heard Kevin started treating her like she was in the way. After all the terrible things she's done to me, her son mistreating her now must make her regretful. It's too late for regrets. I hope she spends the rest of her life lamenting her choices. Eventually, through an introduction from my uncle, I met a new man and remarried successfully. Now, I live happily with him. I can't thank the coworker and my uncle enough for helping me out. I plan on repaying this kindness little by little for the rest of my life.
My name is Kelly, and I am 62 years old. I live alone in an apartment in Irvine. My mother divorced shortly after I was born, so I grew up in a single mother family. Fortunately, after the divorce, my father provided me with adequate support and cared for me until I entered college. Following that, I joined a reasonably well-known company, and we had an arranged marriage thanks to an introduction from my boss. My son was born soon after, and we were enjoying our days together. But my husband died suddenly because of illness shortly after my son began working. My son's name is Mike. He was an honest child who cared for me as a child, but his personality began to change when he entered college. His selfishness worsened after my husband died, and he would say things like, "I'm on my own now, so leave me alone." I'd say he's become more dependable, but I'm wondering if it's because I'm getting older that I'm feeling a little lonely. My son is marrying the daughter of one of his client's presidents, whom he met through a business acquaintance. Her family seems to be a rich family, and they look down on my son, who comes from a single mother family, at first. But her father said, "Talking about family background nowadays is an anachronism." That is fine if you both agree. When I first visited her parents' home for the wedding ceremony, I was astounded by its size and magnificence. I then gave my son the house I was living in and moved into a new apartment that I purchased with my husband's inheritance. It is in Irvine, but I like the peace and quiet of the suburbs. My son's wife had the temperament of a wealthy daughter from an old rich family. She seemed to look down on me, a divorced woman living in a small Irvine apartment. She seemed to think I was a poor person on a pension. "I don't mean to be rude to you, but may I ask you a question?" "Yes, what is it?" "I'm afraid you have financial problems." "Thank you for your concern, but I've been able to make a decent living." "My family is well known, and my father is the president of a well-known furniture manufacturer. He's the CEO. Do you get what I'm saying?" She boasted about her family as if it was normal to do so. "So, do you believe you'll be able to obtain financial assistance?" "What do you mean?" "Let me tell you frankly, I don't want our money going toward your living expenses." She believes I am a poor woman who will be a burden on her family. "Oh, I never thought about it." "Perhaps not now, but you will, won't you?" I was wondering what kind of education she got. "Oh, well, thank you very much for your generosity, but you don't have to worry about that. Keep that in mind." She then walked away from me. Her reaction was unusual, and I could tell how bad her personality is. Then, sometime later, my son and his wife visited me. I made a lot of homemade dishes to keep them entertained since my son returned after a while. My mother was from the Anaheim region, so I made light flavored dishes. I made a vegetable stew and boiled some fish. She is from the Palm Springs region, so she thought they were too bland and didn't taste good. "It's a pretty bad dish. Is there more meat or something?" "I'm sorry. I grew up near the sea, so I know how to cook fish but not meat." "You had a very poor diet, didn't you?" she said, dismissing my modesty. But I wasn't impoverished. I barely got back at her. "I'm not sure how you define poor, but we weren't poor." My son, who was standing nearby, unusually took my side. "But it looks poor because there are only vegetables and fish. This vegetable soup was made from instant tofu and dried seaweed." Her arrogance was unending. "I don't make ready-made meals. I make it by myself." I was so enraged that I retorted angrily. "But, Mom, her family's meat dishes are excellent. Palm Springs has many brands of elite beef, and I'm now a big fan of it." I didn't understand what my son was thinking. He reversed his earlier opinion and followed up with his own wife. Her family, by the way, is living in a well-known area in Palm Springs for its elite beef. "Please cut the elite local beef. It's easy to cut with chopsticks and melts in your mouth." "Ah, I apologize. You usually eat the best one. It's quite expensive, so it's not for you." She giggled as she put her hand over her mouth. I couldn't help but laugh at her. One day, when I had almost forgotten about such things, I was invited to Anna's parents' home. Because it was the end of summer and there were few tourists, I was asked if I wanted to come. It was my son's idea this time. I accepted the invitation because I had no plans and had not had the opportunity to visit Palm Springs. Despite the fact that it was an invitation, I brought some sweets from a long-established Irvine shop as a gift. "Don't worry about it. I get tired of eating so much. But since I'm here, I'll receive it." Anna's sarcasm irritated me, but this is my in-laws' home. Except for me, everyone was an enemy. My in-laws' house was as beautiful as ever. They had renovated the garden and created a pond in which the carp swam gracefully. The carp cost approximately $10 million. They are few in number, but I chose quality over quantity. I counseled them. His wife looked overjoyed. I was reminded of how much she shows off things. my son and his wife invited me to a luxury hot spring hotel nearby. I enjoyed their magnificent hot spring facilities, as well as their pride and joy of fine Kobe beef. I think I would have enjoyed it even more if there were none of her usual sarcastic comments. Then there was a time when we went to my in-laws' house to say thank you and goodbye, and we were all drinking tea together. Thank you very much for your assistance this time. I was able to enjoy hot spring and delicious food because of you. My thank you speech changed into a terrible situation. There's no need to thank me for that. His wife seemed to be preparing for a battle. My son has been blessed with a wonderful family, and as his mother, I am grateful. Thank you very much. I said something that I had no intention of saying. My main concern is for you. I was concerned when I saw your house. Do you live with your pension? That should be enough for a normal life. But won't it eventually run out and force you to come to my parents' house for assistance? I'd appreciate it if you could refrain. I have never considered it. No, it could happen anytime soon, could it? So I'd better get it figured out while I still could. She got in the main talk. Can you sort this out? What do you mean? I'm not even a monster. I invited you here to have one last good time with your son. Did you like it? Yes, it was enjoyable. That makes me happy. So I'm going to cut off a relationship with you once and for all. What? What do you mean? We would be greatly inconvenienced if you became a beggar, so we would prefer that you became a stranger. Beggar? Stranger? I repeated her words because I didn't understand what she meant. That's why I'm asking you to abandon us now. Do you get what I'm saying? I was enraged by her condescending attitude, but I managed to keep it under control. I realized what you meant. If you wish that, I will do so. She was relieved by my understanding response. Don't worry, I've already prepared the bus fare for your return trip. Bye then. She continued sarcastically until the end. Anyway, I just want to thank you for what you did this time. Thank you a lot. I returned to Irvine after leaving those dismissive words. I was furious at what my son and his wife had done to me, but I didn't take any action. Then, in an attempt to de-stress, I traveled to Beverly Hills, a city I adore. I've stopped sending money to my son for good since then. I had been giving him some of the dividends from my father's stock as pocket money, but I had no choice but to stop when he told me he was going to distance himself from me. My son begged me to keep giving him money, but I refused, saying that I would no longer support him because we broke off our relationship. Apparently, he doesn't inform his wife that I have sent him money. Anna was holding his wallet, and apparently, he was spending money from me on anime merchandise. When they got married, Anna threw all of his prized possessions away, and then he gradually began collecting them again. Then, I heard that Anna's father had passed out. Fortunately, he survived, but due to his stroke, he was unable to continue his work. And my son and his wife have assumed the roles of family governor and president. My daughter-in-law's family is quite wealthy, but the company's management was aggressive and unpopular. Since my son and his wife took over the company's management has been plagued. Clients were dissatisfied with the way the company has been run and have stopped doing business with them. I would normally have gone to see him because he was my daughter-in-law's father, but because I had been cut off from them, I did not. Anna has a similar personality to her father, so she will probably most likely conduct herself in the same way. However, she does not appear to have much business acumen in my opinion. I was concerned about her future because she is selfish and looks down on others. The company's sales have fallen as expected, and the new business she started has failed to materialize, leaving them with nothing but more debt. Sales of high-end furniture, the company's mainstay, remained slow, and it was clear that the company as a whole would lose money in the future. I was concerned, but I decided to wait and see what happened. The company then conducted a major reorganization in which the entire board of directors was replaced. My son, who became the new president, called for the main business to be downsized and new divisions to be established. I'm not sure about the specifics, but it seems that the decision was made by Anna, who is the company's largest shareholder. My son is a representative director, but he seems to have gone unnoticed. It was definitely her way of doing things. However, this was a big failure. Sales in the main business operations plummeted, and the new division performed far below expectations. The stock price dropped significantly as the company's performance deteriorated, and the company's survival became doubtful as more and more employees who had given up on the company began to resign. I had been watching the stock price, but it kept falling. Dividends were no longer paid, and the quarterly reports and stock firms' general comments were depressing. The company may be delisted soon. If the stock is delisted, it will be impossible to buy and sell shares on the market, and raising funds would be extremely difficult. Banks are unlikely to extend loans, so the only option is for them to liquidate their holdings. Her parents own a number of local forests and other properties, but they are not expected to be worth much because they are in a rural area. Still, at the end of the day, they had no choice but to sell them. I can't be bothered because I'm cut off from them. I carried on with my life in the same as before. My son and his wife then contacted me several times for some reason, but I ignored them because I didn't need them. Then there was the time I was on my annual sightseeing tour of Beverly Hills, admiring the autumn leaves. The mushrooms this year were smaller, possibly due to the weather, but the flavor was richer and the taste was excellent. It soothed my heart when combined with the colorful scenery of the autumn leaves outside. While I was enjoying Beverly Hills' autumn scenery and food, I received a call from one of the staff members. "There's a visitor here to see you." Huh? I don't have an appointment, and only a few people know I'm in Beverly Hills. What is the visitor's name? Yes, Smith. Her name is Anna Smith. Smith? I paused for a moment, but it hit me right away. I know her, but we're taking a break from each other for some reason. Please ask her to leave. Yes. She is very eager to see you. She even got down on her knees. How should I deal with this? Well, there's nothing I can do. Send her to the guest room, please. I'll return once I've finished getting ready. I returned to my room and changed into something more appropriate. It's been a long time. I understand your family, and I have been cutting off our relationship. What made you come here? I had no idea you came this far. I greeted her calmly. It's been a long time. Thank you so much for forgiving me for all the disrespect I've shown you in the past. What is this? I'm not forgiving you. I only came to see you on a whim. Misunderstandings would make you difficult to think. No. My words were too strong. I apologize. Her face is flushed from the nervousness and my cold attitude. I've heard that you own this mansion. Can you tell me how you got this? She should have heard something about my true identity somewhere. It was clear to me that she had come to me because she was desperate for money. That's none of your business, I said as I smiled and dismissed her. This is my father's villa. It was given to me by my father, I said after a brief pause. I made the decision to speak clearly. Oh, who is your father? John Scott. He's deceased, but don't you know him? What? Oh, the previous president of Scott Trading. Does that mean you're the former president's daughter? This new revelation has made her shocked. Let me explain this in detail. I am his daughter of his ex-wife, and I use my mother's surname. My half-brother is the current president of the company. My mother has already died, and I have been taking distance myself from the Scott family. Because my personality is not suited to business, I delegated company management to my younger brother. I wanted to live quietly for the rest of my life, so I received a portion of the company's shares as an advancement from my father and got this house. I see. She seemed she understood. Let me tell you about my current financial situation. As an inexperienced stockbroker, I do not buy or sell stocks, but I do receive dividends twice a year. Dividends are paid to me twice a year, which covers my expenses. To begin with, I don't want to live a fancy life. This house is managed by my brother. He has a maid stationed in the house, so I can use here at any time. She was almost speechless. Why are you here, by the way? I just wanted to double check that I'm properly abandoned, am I right? Yes. As you are aware, our family business is struggling, and I was hoping you would be willing to assist us. She begged desperately. What's the point of this? I asked with my plain expression. When my father became ill, my husband took over as president, but he was inexperienced. As a relative, I thought it would be better if I took charge, so I assisted him in various ways. Do you mean that my son was merely an ornament for you to wield real power? That's exactly what I'm saying. At this point, she must have concluded that her bizarre evasions were futile. Her explanation was accurate, though. What happened next? The product mix change that I had initiated had failed, and we were saddled with massive losses and debt, and I did everything I could to help. So you're saying you've turned to me? That's correct. I let out a sigh. Do you want me to assist you with that? Yes. I'd be delighted to assist. Do you remember what you told me? You will isolate me from your family because I'm a nuisance to you if I beg. What exactly are you saying and doing now that you said it would be a bother if I begged? Oh, it's for money. That is known as begging in this world. You are correct. Right? I told her with a smile. I will decline. I don't want you to dismiss me. You've treated me so poorly, and now you want me to assist you. I apologize. I'm sorry, but I need... She bends her knees and rubs her chin against the floor. I didn't pay attention to her and said, I am not a person who is capable of giving alms to a beggar. Please leave. Please. The bank will no longer lend to me, and I have nowhere to rely. She kept getting down on her knees, and she didn't care that the hem of her dress was a mess. Please leave. I sincerely wish you the best. The visitor is leaving. Send her to the entrance. And for the last time, sprinkle some salt on them, I told her and my maid. The 4 maids dragged her out of the room, standing her up and holding her from both sides as she remained on her knees and refused to move. I went back to my room, returned my gaze to the blazing autumn leaves, and softly murmured, I just want to live in peace. Later, I knew that her company had gone bankrupt. She gave up her land and house to settle down, and with the little money she had left, she rented a small, rented house. And they spent days working part-time. I'm still living in an apartment in Irvine. When my son married and moved out, he bought a cat for me because he knew I'd be lonely. He is Dime, a Maine Coon. He is a long-haired cat, so he is difficult to care for, but he enjoys being brushed and is always quiet. Seeing his comfortable face makes me happy as well. I'd like to go to Beverly Hills. Why don't we go in the winter like we always go in the fall? It's too hot for you in the summer. He began biting my hand sweetly while I was petting him, Hey! He licks the spot on my hand, where he bit me as if he apologized. You're so cute. Time had already won my heart. Then I returned to Beverly Hills. Outside, it was snowing. Dime is in my arms, staring out the window with me. You were only the size of my palm when you first arrived at my house, but you've grown so much. I thought he was quiet, but Dime fallen asleep before I noticed. It's true what they say about a sleeping child growing up, but if you grow any larger, I won't be able to hold you. I looked out once more, brushing the tip of Dime's nose as he slept. It had been a quiet, snowy night. I was nodding off as well. I was wondering if there would be a lovely snowy landscape tomorrow morning. I went to bed thinking about this. Dime is also sleeping next to me. As I closed my eyes, I told myself that I was going to have a good dream. I closed my eyes and thought.
In a world, there are stories of wicked mothers-in-law and sisters-in-law who torment their daughters-in-law. But the opposite can happen too. Listen to our story of how a strong-willed daughter-in-law broke our family and how we rebuilt it. My name is Freya. I'm 25 years old. Just the other day, I married Knox, who is 3 years older than me at work, and I am on top of the world. When I left the house I had lived in for many years, my grandmother said, I'll be lonely here too, but Freya, live happily. If anything happens, you can always come back. She sent me off with those words. My parents divorced when I was in 8th grade and my brother Elliot was in 12th grade. We weren't at an age where we absolutely needed a mother, and since Elliot and I were both preparing for exams and for financial reasons, we children lived with our father. Our grandmother, my father's mother, took care of us preparing meals and cleaning. The reason for the divorce was my father's infidelity. My grandmother often said, I really feel sorry for your mother. My son isn't a bad person, but he's always had a weakness for women. Or rather, he's too timid to refuse an invitation. He was a kind and good father to us siblings, but marital relationships and relationships between men and women are different matters. My grandmother was a gentle and hard-working person. I have never seen her take a break. Whenever she had a free moment, she would start cleaning or knitting, her hobby. Elliot and I received many sweaters and scarves knitted by her. Even though they were divorced, we often met with our mother for meals or shopping, so we didn't feel particularly lonely. I think my mother really loved my father. Even after they separated, she often worried about him. That's probably why she couldn't forgive his infidelity. I remember my mother crying throughout the funeral when my father suddenly died of a stroke 6 years ago. When my father died, my mother had already remarried, so living with her was not an option for us siblings. We couldn't leave our grandmother alone in this big house, and Elliot agreed. Our mother said she would help us in any way if something happened. Then I got married and moved out, leaving my grandmother and Elliot alone in the old, too large house. It's only a 15-minute drive from our new home, so I'll visit often. I want to get grandma's cooking. I really thought so and intended to do so, but a year after I moved out, Elliot got married. That was the beginning of everything. Elliot, 29, had impregnated a woman 4 years older. I was surprised by the words of Diana, who would become my sister-in-law when we first met. I am having a child, so I made him take responsibility and marry me. I really didn't want to get married. I think the responsibility lies with both adults. If you don't want to get married, then use contraception, I thought to myself, but didn't say it out loud. To be honest, my impression of Diana was quite bad. She has a beautiful face, but I think her bad personality shows on her face. Despite saying she didn't want to get married, both the wedding and reception were quite lavish. I think Elliot must have struggled a lot. There must have been financial help from my grandmother. Elliot, perhaps like our father, is kind-hearted but weak-willed. It was clear that he was already under the thumb of his older wife. The first time I visited my grandmother's house after Elliot's wedding, Diana said to me, "You're married now, right? You shouldn't be coming back here so often. Be careful." such an arrogant attitude right off the bat. I was annoyed to comply with Diana's wishes, but naturally, my visit to my grandmother's house became less frequent. I did rush to congratulate them when the baby was born, but I couldn't help but worry about my grandmother's condition. She had lost a lot of weight. "Grandma, are you okay? You have lost some weight, haven't you? Are you feeling ill?" When I asked, my grandmother laughed and said, "I'm fine. At my age, being heavy is hard on the knees, so losing a little weight is just right." She says she's not feeling bad, but my grandmother will be 77 next month. As a granddaughter who adores her, I can't help but worry. "Grandma, your birthday is next month. We have to celebrate." When I said that, she replied, No, it's fine. My great-grandchild was just born, so I'm not in the mood for that." Always so modest. Why don't we celebrate the baby and your birthday together? I thought it was a great idea, but my grandmother firmly declined. "Really? Don't worry about me. Just celebrate the baby." I tried to talk to Elliot and Diana directly, but Diana shot me down. "It's bad luck to celebrate an old person with little time left and a newborn baby together. Besides, she said she doesn't need it, right? There's no need to force it." What's with her? Taking advantage of grandma's kindness and saying whatever she wants? Saying little time left outright? I was furious and vented my anger to Knox. "Come on, Freya, I understand why you're angry, but if grandma asks for help, we can be there for her. I'll help too when that time comes." Knox's words were comforting, but I have never seen my grandmother complain or show weakness. That's why I am worried. The following year, I became pregnant. I tried to talk to Elliot and Diana directly, but Diana dismissed me again. "Giving birth is really hard. It's very painful and agonizing. Are you sure you'll be okay, Freya?" Talking down to me about something every woman knows, it was incredibly irritating. I was also concerned that Elliot's child, who was almost 2, was clinging to my grandmother. Even when Diana called, the child hid behind my grandmother and wouldn't go to its mother. "Oh dear, how unlovable. She's completely tamed her great-grandchild," Diana said, looking displeased. What an awful thing to say. I know from Elliot that Diana returned to full-time work 2 months after giving birth. During those 2 months of maternity leave, she apparently dumped most of the housework and childcare on my grandmother. Elliot told her many times not to leave the child rearing to our grandmother, but she wouldn't listen. Isn't the reason the child doesn't come to you because you have left all the childcare to grandma? Of course, the child will become attached to the person who's always there and takes care of them. When I said that, Diana replied, "You know, I never wanted children or even to get married. I have no intention of quitting my job, and I'm needed at my company. You might not understand that." Diana's way of speaking really gets under my skin every time. I'm sure she's under a witch's curse. If she accidentally utters a kind word, the curse will make her face swell to twice its size. That's the only way I can make sense of her. On my way home, I was called over by Rosie from my house across the street. Rosie and I have known each other since I was a child. She's a bit of a gossip, but a good-natured and friendly person. During a neighborhood chat, Rosie and her friends asked Diana, who was returning from work, "You're already back at work after just having a baby? Are you feeling okay?" Diana replied that her daughter had been taken by her grandmother and she was being forced to work. Of course, I completely denied that, and Rosie, who has known my grandmother even longer than I have, didn't believe Diana's words either. She probably called me over because she was worried, not believing Diana. If we leave Diana alone, there's no telling what lies she will spread about the neighborhood. I was thinking that I needed to have a serious talk with Elliot about Diana when all of a sudden, my grandmother collapsed. She fell while pulling weeds in the garden and was taken away in an ambulance. It happened during a break in the June rainy season. The lady across the street called the ambulance. Diana couldn't be reached and Elliot was stuck in a meeting, so they contacted me. Fortunately, it was just mild heat stroke. My grandmother had regained consciousness by the time I arrived. "Grandma, are you okay?" I called out, and my grandmother, more concerned about her great-granddaughter, said, "Oh, Freya, what about the baby? She should be napping in the room visible from the garden. It would be pitiful if she woke up alone." Apparently, my grandmother had been pulling weeds while checking on her great-granddaughter's nap. You should have let Elliot do the weeding. You shouldn't overdo it, Grandma. Never mind that. Hurry home and check on her. If she's awake and crying, give her the rabbit stuffed animal. That usually stops her crying. She urged me on. My grandmother was kept in the hospital for a day to be safe given her age. I rushed to my grandmother's house and found my niece still sound asleep in the room facing the garden. When I returned to the hospital with my niece, my grandmother was asleep. My niece, who seemed a little frightened by the hospital atmosphere, trotted over to my grandmother and asked, "Nana, Nana, are you okay? Does your tummy hurt?" My grandmother woke up and stroked her head. "Oh, good. Nana is fine, Freya. I'm so sorry to bother you, especially with a baby in your belly." Even at this time, my grandmother was worried about my niece and me. "Hey, Grandma, the lady across the street told me that Diana is telling people in the neighborhood that she has been forced to work and that you have taken her daughter. Aren't you upset being bossed around by someone like that and even lied about? I'm furious. It makes me so angry." I was trying to keep my voice down because we were in a hospital room, but tears started to flow and I couldn't stop them. My grandmother silently stroked my head. "Yes, I want to leave that house." Then she whispered. It was the first time I had ever heard my grandmother's voice of weakness. "Exactly, Grandma. You don't have to work for someone like Diana. Let's live together at my place." I truly felt that way, but my grandmother said, "Thank you, Freya, but I can't. What would happen to this child if I were gone?" She said this while stroking the head of her great-granddaughter who was standing beside the bed looking puzzled. "They'll figure it out. They are her parents after all." Just then Elliot, the child's father, arrived after leaving work early. "Grandma, are you okay? I told you I would do the weeding on my next day off." From what Elliot said, it seemed that Diana had ordered my grandmother to do the weeding. How far is she willing to exploit our grandmother? I know it's pointless to say anything, but I couldn't keep quiet. According to Elliot, he never thought she was so selfish when they were dating. I have heard of husbands changing after marriage, but it seems wives can change too. I always thought that a husband would become more arrogant over the years. But there are people like Diana. What Elliot told me was beyond my imagination. My grandmother was treated like Diana's slave. Elliot tried to warn and scold her, but she didn't care, and all Elliot could do was help his grandmother. It's shameful for Elliot, but he's always been a kind person, like his grandmother and father. I never want my grandmother to go back to that house. The dream I had that night was the worst. My grandmother, Elliot, and I were desperately rowing oars under a violently rocking ship. If we rested our hands, a whip would come flying. Diana was the one wielding the whip. When my grandmother is discharged tomorrow, I told Elliot she should come to my place for emergency shelter. It's the weekend and both Elliot and Diana are off work. They'll be fine without grandmother. I want her to rest and think about the future. Elliot seemed resolved, saying, "I love my daughter, but I think this marriage was a mistake. I'll take responsibility." He said that and left with his daughter. When my discharged grandmother stepped into my small 2DK apartment, she laughed and said, "Oh my, it's quite cozy. Cleaning will be easy." She had lived in that big old house for many years. It's not surprising she felt that way. When I moved out of that house and started living here, I was shocked by the smallness too. Thanks to that, I was teased as the young lady by Knox for a while. No matter how much I told my grandmother to rest, she kept working, cleaning the water areas and cooking for my husband. While relaxing with after-dinner coffee, Elliot called. His daughter was throwing a tantrum and wouldn't take a shower. "She always wants her grandma to bathe her. She says she won't go in without Bertie." "What's Bertie?" he said, but I couldn't stand being bothered with such things. "What's her mother doing?" When I asked, I was surprised to hear that she had gone on an overnight trip with friends since morning. My grandmother guessed from the conversation that Bertie was a duck toy and it was on the shelf in the dressing room. Traveling when the grandmother had collapsed? Leaving a young daughter to travel even if it was pre-booked, I understood that Diana was completely unreliable in childcare. "Elliot, I'm coming over tomorrow. I can't stand it anymore. She's the worst as both a mother and a wife. Elliot, you need to get it together too. When I said that, Elliot seemed to have made up his mind. Okay, I think she'll be back after 7 in the evening. He said that and hung up. That's a relief. Bertie must be relieved too. I called my mother. I had reported about Diana a few times, but my mother never thought it would be this bad. Elliot is just like his father. He can't take a strong stance against women, my mother said with a sigh, promising to support us fully. The next day, when Diana returned from her trip, she was met by Elliot, me, his sister-in-law, our grandmother, and not just us, but also Knox, our mother, and her new husband. A total of 6 people. Our niece was put to bed by our grandmother. Oh, what? Why are there so many people? Why are there people I don't know? Who are you? Diana said to my mother and her new husband. They are Elliot's and my mother? The man next to her is her new husband? When I said that, she replied, oh, the one who left this house and her child? Why are you here now and what do you want? With that one sentence, I think Diana completely turned my mother against her. I called them? My mother's husband is a lawyer. Diana looked a little startled when she heard the word lawyer from me. Elliot promptly said, divorce me. I can't go on with you. He said it firmly. What? What are you talking about all of a sudden? What did I do? Diana screamed. Well, you did. You exploited our dear grandmother. You left your daughter and went on a trip when grandma collapsed. You dumped almost all the housework on her. You left childcare to her too. I said to Diana very calmly, listing the points. But I'm working, aren't I? Isn't it normal for the family to help? But you're not putting your income into the household, are you? You are using it for trips like this one and for your clothes and cosmetics, right? I was speechless when I heard this from Elliot. Why do I have to be told that by you? I never wanted to get married or have children in the first place. Elliot got me pregnant and I had to marry him and have the child. She acted as if she was the victim and not at fault at all. That's when Elliot spoke. I didn't want to talk about this in front of everyone, but you said it was a safe date, didn't you? I didn't really want to hear such a raw story from Elliot, but it seemed Diana had planned the pregnancy. And you said on the phone with your friend, at this age, people around me are nagging, so I thought it would be good to get married and have at least one child. It's a detached house with a garden. He's the eldest son, no mother-in-law, and the sister-in-law is married off. Quite a good property. Usually quiet Elliot said all this at once. Diana turned bright red and yelled, What? You were eavesdropping? It's not eavesdropping when you were talking loudly. Grandma heard it too. You don't care about me or Grandma. Only about yourself, so it doesn't matter who hears it, right? Even when Elliot said that, Diana didn't seem to back down. There is no evidence of that. It's impossible for you to unilaterally divorce me. Besides, I'm the mother. You can't separate me from my child. What nerve she has playing the mother card now after leaving childcare entirely to our grandmother? We have evidence, I said, pulling out my mobile phone. It contained videos forwarded from Elliot, showing Diana's daily comments and how she treated our grandmother like a slave. Elliot might be timid, but he must have been trembling with anger inside. When he started thinking about divorce, he thought something might be used as evidence, so he recorded audio and video. With this much evidence, you won't get custody. If you don't agree to the divorce, there's the option of mediation, but you have no chance of winning. Don't forget, we have a lawyer on our side, I said, glancing at my mother's husband, who nodded deeply in silence. Elliot then promptly spread the filled-out divorce papers on the table. The video showed Diana lounging on the sofa watching TV and our grandmother diligently taking care of her great-granddaughter changing her clothes. What is this? What's going on? Don't mess with me. Diana, her face bright red, scribbled and signed the divorce papers, then grabbed her belongings in her room, saying, I am glad to leave this big, shabby house. I'll come back for my stuff later. Don't you dare dispose of it. And left with those parting words. After Diana left, the room was as quiet as if a storm had passed. Thank you all. I will make some coffee now. Everyone came to their senses at our grandmother's words. Grandma, I'll do it. Just sit down, I said, going to the kitchen to boil water. I haven't been in this kitchen for a while, my mother said, helping me with the cookies. Mom, thank you for bringing your husband. Having a lawyer with us was very reassuring, I said, and she replied, Yes, I'm glad I brought him. That daughter-in-law is quite a handful. I may be the bad mother who left this place, but I want you, Elliot, and Grandma to be happy. Really. My mother smiled. As we all sipped coffee and nibbled cookies, our grandmother made a significant announcement. I'm thinking of rebuilding this house. Then maybe Freya and her family will live here. When I left home to get married, my grandmother told me I could always come back. I thought it was a bad omen, but it came true in a different way, a happy way. About a year later, a splendid two-family house was completed. It's a slightly unconventional two-family setup with the first floor completely barrier-free for our grandmother, Elliot, and our niece. The second floor is for my husband, our newly born child, and me. By the way, we had a boy. There's a mini kitchen on the second floor separate from the main kitchen so we can cook simple meals there. There's also a sunroom that feels open even in rainy weather so the children can play without trouble. There are enough rooms for more children in the future, and even if Elliot remarries, we can live comfortably. As a side note, our son was born easily. I wish I could tell Diana, who was boasting about her childbirth. Our grandmother paid for the entire cost of rebuilding. The heads of the household are Elliot and Knox. I wonder if I'm lucky enough to live in such a splendid house and to be the head of the household. Knox initially felt hesitant, but now he's completely settled in, living happily with his grandmother, Elliot, and his niece. Speaking of Diana, who is divorced, her parents' home is a two-bedroom apartment and they have no room to accommodate their returned daughter, let alone space to store her vast collection of clothes, shoes, and bags. Diana seems to have no choice but to live in a cheap one-bedroom apartment. Although divorced, she still has the right to visit her daughter. Despite not trying to see her daughter for over 6 months, Diana, having somehow learned about the house renovation, seems to have pressured Elliot for a reconciliation. She's truly a self-centered and shameless person. Of course, Elliot coldly rejected her. I never knew that Grandma was so wealthy. If Diana had known that, her attitude towards our grandmother would have been different, and she would never have agreed to the divorce. My father and late grandfather left it to me. I was thinking of giving it to you while I was alive, but after that daughter-in-law came, I decided to keep the money a secret. The thought that the house and money might have become Diana's sent chills down their spines. I want you and Elliot to be happy. Grandmother had seen through Diana's true nature even while being treated so poorly. But rebuilding the house was my selfish desire. I wanted to spend my remaining years peacefully with my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Grandmother said, looking a bit apologetic. Stop it, Grandma. They say life lasts 100 years now. You have to stay healthy until the great-grandchildren get married. When I said that, Grandma replied, That sounds delightful, and smiled gently. Seeing her like that, I want her to live surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren peacefully and happily. People like Diana who only think of themselves and can't care for others will live as they please and leave this world alone. It's too late to regret when you're old and have no one around. One day while thinking about this, I heard the news of a company's bankruptcy. It sounded familiar and it turned out to be Diana's workplace. The first misfortune came sooner than expected. I don't know if Diana will actually lose her job, but surely a life like a rolling stone awaits her. Elliot seems to have a new girlfriend lately. Elliot, don't repeat the same mistake, okay? When I warned him, Elliot retorted, I know, one strong-willed woman like Freya is enough. And everyone laughed. The children, my son and niece, laughed without understanding the meaning. When the adults are smiling, the children smile too.
My daughter-in-law is not family, so she's in the way. With those words echoing, the car drove off, leaving me behind. Lost in unfamiliar mountains, on unknown terrain, I felt utterly bewildered, and Mason's funeral is about to start. A few days earlier, upon hearing the grave news about Mason, my husband and I rushed to his family's home. Everyone had been prepared for Mason's passing, since he had been in the hospital for some time. Rather than a sense of sorrow, it felt more like relief that Mason was finally free from pain. However, the funeral preparations were quite a challenge. My husband's family home, situated in the mountains, is the main branch of the family. They used to own vast lands in the past. Although the family's fortune was squandered by the grandfather's generation, their pride as the main family remained. During occasions like Christmas or family gatherings, many relatives would come, and I was always roped in to help. Given that Mason was the head of such a family, his funeral had to be grand. Sue, my mother-in-law, and Wyatt, my husband, and Grace, his sister, were all in a frenzy. Our family is the main branch. The funeral has to be grander than for Mason's younger brother.
Right, we're expecting about 100 attendees.
Maybe I should get a new pearl necklace for the occasion. While everyone voiced their own opinions, I, the daughter-in-law, was left to handle all the preparations.
Austin, ensure you discuss everything properly with the funeral home. You know it best.
Please make sure to choose the best altar and coffin. The catering after the viewing should be from that fancy restaurant. Their steak is delicious. Truth be told, due to family circumstances, I had worked at a funeral home before getting married. This seemed to be another reason the in-laws looked down upon me. I certainly know the ins and outs of funeral preparations, so I don't mind handling them. But it's frustrating that they push all the planning and communication with the relatives onto me, yet never miss an opportunity to voice their opinions. It's the worst. Upgrading the altar will cost an additional $1,200, and the coffin is $400 more. Is that okay? It's the daughter-in-law's duty to manage such things. Typically, the deceased's favorite dishes are served during the viewing. If the dishes look cheap, it'll be embarrassing.
Just do as you're told. With the gifts from all the attendees, we'll manage.
Reluctantly, I went ahead with the preparations to ensure a grand funeral to their satisfaction. Then came the day of the funeral. 4 of us got into the car my husband was driving from the in-laws' house. However, as we approached the mountain path, the car suddenly halted. Look, those wild lilies over there were Dad's favorites. Austin, could you pick some for us? Huh? Where exactly? Right there in the woods. Quickly go grab some. Though I couldn't see the flowers from inside the car, I thought I might spot them up close, so I stepped out. Just then, Mason had everything thought out and arranged for us. No sooner had Sue spoken than the car sped off. I stood there completely taken aback, watching it disappear. My name's Austin and I'm 42. In reality, due to personal reasons, I had dropped out of school and worked at a funeral home until I got married. I didn't dislike the job, but the erratic hours and scarce days off wore me out. It was around that time I met Wyatt, introduced by a friend. Wyatt was 6 years older than me and seemed very dependable. He told me it was okay if I wanted to quit my job, and that led us to get married. In hindsight, it might have been a way for me to escape my situation. Nevertheless, we've been married for 20 years now. Although we haven't had children, I believe we've managed fairly well with my kind-hearted husband. Well, except for the dealings with his family. His family was all about pride, being the main branch and showing off. Whenever there was a family gathering or a Christmas, they'd go all out with a feast to welcome the relatives. And all of that preparation fell on my shoulders. Neither Sue nor Grace, who lives with them, would lift a finger to help. They'd just sit and critique. I told my husband multiple times I didn't want to visit them. At our home, he helps with chores, but at his family's, he feels free of responsibilities, so he never refuses to go. On top of that, he'd act all macho only when we're at his family's place, like he's whipped. However, every time we returned home, he'd apologize profusely and try to make it up to me. Eventually, for the sake of our marriage, I decided to endure these visits, but only twice a year. But I never expected they'd dump the entire preparation for Mason's funeral on me.
Look, Austin, you've got to handle all of Dad's funeral.
What are you saying? I can help, but it's not all on me.
Why not? You worked at a funeral home, right? You know everything about it. We have no clue about funerals. Please handle it.
I reluctantly agreed, but that's when the nightmare began. The funeral home the hospital recommended has a bad reputation. Austin, can you find a better one?
That funeral venue looked old, didn't it? Change it to a nicer one.
White chrysanthemums are so gloomy. Pick something more vibrant. Every decision I made with the funeral director was criticized, forcing me to redo the arrangements repeatedly. In between, I had to contact all the relatives, arrange taxis for the elderly, and handle the return gifts. There was an endless list of tasks. Austin, I'm hungry. Can you hurry with the food? Anticipate our needs without us having to ask. Instead of grabbing a sandwich from the convenience store, they demanded meals from me. I'm swamped with funeral preparations. Wyatt, tell them to sort out their own meals. I finally asked my husband, but with the confidence from being home, he frowned at my request.
But you're the wife. You should handle meals.
Excuse me? Frustrated by his attitude and lack of support, I served them simple pasta. Wow, that's lazy. If you're serving pasta, you should add snacks.
Yeah, Mom's right.
Facing their unreasonable demands during Mason's funeral preparations, I realized arguing was a waste. I just did as told.
I hope you're arranging the funeral as we instructed.
The altar and coffin are top of the line. I finished contacting all the relatives and the return gifts already. No issues.
There better not be any mistakes.
Stop talking down to me, especially when you dump everything on me. After the viewing, my husband's attitude infuriated me, leading to a heated exchange. Mason appreciated me. He even called me before his death, thanking me for putting up with all your unreasonable demands. In my husband's family, only Mason treated me with kindness. Before he passed, he called just for me, saying,
"Thank you for all you've done. I'm sorry for the unreasonable demands everyone constantly makes. Anyway, you know funeral preparations better. Just get it done."
Is everything financially sound? After all, you've been demanding top-notch everything without checking prices.
Just do what you're told. If you keep arguing, we might as well divorce.
Taken aback by the sudden mention of divorce, I asked, "Are you serious?"
Absolutely. My mom always said I should have married someone better.
Excuse me?
My cousin, who recently got divorced and came back to the family, is stunningly beautiful. She even won a university beauty contest.
Wyatt told me.
At the viewing, my aunt kept pestering me about marrying her after divorcing you, Austin.
During the post-viewing dinner, while I was swamped with serving tea and cleaning up, Wyatt just sat there, sipping beer and chatting with relatives. I couldn't believe that was the topic of their conversation. As I fumed in silence, Wyatt's confidence grew. I kept telling myself to hold on just one more day until the funeral was over. The next day, we were on our way to the funeral in a car driven by my husband. But as we reached the mountain path, Sue demanded I pick lilies for Mason, and they left me stranded there. Usually my husband wouldn't pull a stunt like this, but there he was, smirking at me from the speeding car. He probably had that beautiful cousin he mentioned yesterday on his mind. At this point, whatever, I've done all I could for the funeral. The funeral service will handle the rest. Although being left was quite shocking, there was a slight relief in knowing I didn't have to oblige to the family's every whim anymore. My real issue now? How to navigate this mountain path in my funeral attire and heels. How am I supposed to make my way through this? Exasperated, I sat down by the road. That's when a car stopped in front of me. Hours passed and the funeral was nearing its end.
Hey, where the hell are you, Austin?
I received a frantic call from my husband. What's this about an $800,000 funeral bill? You better get here now! I could hear Sue, her voice almost a shriek in the background. Serves you right. I had to stifle my laughter hearing their predictable reaction.
What's going on? There's no way we can afford an $800,000 funeral.
Wasn't the plan for the gifts from the attendees to cover the funeral costs?
The expected money didn't come through. Plus, only half of the expected guests showed up.
Well, that figures. Gift amounts for funerals in this area range from $30 to $50. For close relatives like parents or siblings, gifts could range from $100 to even $1,000, but knowing how stingy some of our relatives can be, they'd probably give around $30 each. If 100 people each gave $30, that would only total $3,000. Furthermore, many of our relatives are elderly, and a good number of them wouldn't be able to attend the funeral. You should have seen this coming.
Why didn't you tell us?
I did, several times, but you all insisted on the most expensive options. As my husband was at a loss for words, Sue jumped in. Just get back here now. They plan to charge $300 if you were here, but without you, they're saying it's $800,000. What's going on? About that. When Sue told me to find a better funeral home, I was at my wit's end. So I reached out to the president of the funeral company I used to work at. He introduced me to a funeral home near our family home, and because of his influence, they agreed to do it at a much lower price. I had arranged a special price since I was involved, but since I'm not there, it can't be helped. Well then, you just need to come over now.
Please, just do something about it.
Well, I could come, but... As I talked on the phone, I revealed myself to them.
What? You're here?
Actually, when I was lost on that mountain road, the car that stopped was driven by the person in charge from the funeral company. We had met several times to discuss plans, and he was quite shocked to see me sitting on the roadside. Once I explained the situation, he kindly drove me to the funeral hall. I wanted to pay my respects to Mason, so I asked him to bring me here, but I didn't want to be around all of you, so I stayed hidden.
So, you were here after all.
We can reduce the funeral costs now. My husband and Sue were practically dancing with joy. That won't be happening. Why? Because, according to you, I'm not a part of the family. Oh, come on. That was just a slip of the tongue.
You're overreacting. You're my wife.
I'm not anymore.
What do you mean?
You said you wanted a divorce, remember? You can go ahead and marry that beautiful, well-educated cousin of yours.
Look, Before he could finish, Grace, who had been watching from nearby, lunged at me. Enough of your nonsense. Since you're here, we can get the funeral cost down to $300,000, right? No, I won't. And even if it's reduced, how do you plan on paying? We'll just withdraw it from my dad's bank account. He once mentioned he had about that much. That's not possible. Why not? When someone passes away, their bank accounts are frozen. You can't access the money. I heard if you don't inform the bank, it'll be fine. At Grace's comment, I couldn't help but smirk. Seeing my reaction, my husband panicked. You didn't tell the bank, did you? Of course I did. You told me to handle all the funeral matters, so I took the liberty to inform them as well. So, what do we do now? Or were you planning on covering it all? I wanted to say goodbye to Mason properly, which is why I had myself brought here. But since I didn't want to be around all of you, I stayed hidden. I then pulled out a bank book and showed it to them. The bank book I was holding was given to me by Mason just a bit before he passed away. Mason had apologized for the past rudeness of his family and told me, since they'll probably have you handle all the funeral arrangements, please use this bank book to pay for the funeral expenses. He handed me a bank book with $300,000 in it. That's why I had consulted with the funeral director to ensure the costs would be kept within $300,000. But surely you can't withdraw that money, they argued. Actually, I can. I responded confidently. This account was set up with me as a pre-designated agent. In today's aging society, some banks offer a service where a person other than the account holder, if previously assigned, can withdraw funds. Mason was always so thoughtful, planning even for times he wouldn't be here. I said, "Hand over that bank book," they demanded. "I won't." Mason gave clear instructions. If you ever treated me so poorly, I was to take this money as a settlement and divorce. Mason once shared with me, "You know, I married into the family just like you, Austin. I truly understand how you feel." He was brought into Sue's home, who was an only daughter, in order to keep the family legacy. Although the previous generation had squandered most of the family wealth, leaving only the house they lived in, Sue and the relatives would often look down on him and say, "You, as the son-in-law, should just stay quiet." That's why Mason always cared for me. When he gave me the bank book, even knowing he didn't have much time left, he was more concerned about my well-being than his own. But that's Mason's inheritance, right? Daughter-in-laws don't have any rights to inherit, she retorted. Don't worry, he had left a will with a lawyer and he told me it's clearly stated in there. I responded. The trio, unaware of my conversations with Mason, were stunned to learn about the existence of a will. Well, the funeral is done, so I'll take my leave. Just a heads up, Sue apparently spent most of Mason's savings. There's hardly anything left. What? Seeing my husband on the verge of collapsing, I decided to twist the knife a bit further. You know, I'm going to divorce you and sue for compensation in the divorce court for the way your family has treated me. If you refuse the divorce, be prepared. I'm willing to go to court. As I turned on my heel to leave, the voices of the three of them echoed behind me, calling out in desperation. Don't say that. Austin, please wait. Austin, I'm so sorry. Please come back. Please don't leave. I retorted, no way. Even if it comes down to $300,000, how are you going to pay it? To cover the $800,000 funeral cost,
The family had to sell their home, their sole inheritance. But since it was located in a remote countryside, they struggled to find a buyer. When they finally managed to sell it, the proceeds barely covered their debts, leaving them with nothing. With nowhere left to go, Sue and Grace, having lost their home, reluctantly moved in with my husband. However, living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, he complained constantly, and my husband even emailed me about the daily struggles. After receiving dozens of emails from him begging, "Let's start over," I reached out to my trusted attorney and ensured there would be no further contact. I finally freed myself from the burdensome in-laws and my spineless husband, who was constantly swayed by Sue and Grace. Now I'm genuinely happy. Reconnecting with the funeral home's president during Mason's funeral arrangements led him to offer me a position, saying, "Would you like to come back?" I began working there again. Having been on the sending side during Mason's funeral, I believe I now understand the feelings of the grieving family better than in my younger, more passionate days. I'm hopeful that I can now offer funeral services that genuinely support and empathize with the bereaved families.